Welcome to the Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. I'm your host, Dan Hanford, one of the managing partners of PassiveInvesting.com. With us today is Max Sharkansky. Max, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
I'm looking forward to diving into this asset, Patterson Court out of Orlando, Florida, 384 units. Before we dive into this asset, why don't you get us started and share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of where you're focused right now on the multifamily side of things.
Thanks, Dan. We have been in business since 0506. We're in the business of value-add multifamily. We don't work on any other product types. We've bought a couple of shopping centers and small office buildings over the years, but we haven't done so in probably close to 10 years. We've built up a portfolio of right around 5,000 units. We've got just under 5,000 right now. We're about 4.5 with another 2,000 or so in contract. So we'll be at about 6,500 by July. That's a portfolio value of about 1.3, 1.4 billion. And we are continuing to buy in primarily the Eastern Sun Belt. We have an office in Miami, which covers Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. And in the Western states, we have an office in Los Angeles, California that covers Northern California. Well, I should say all of California, Colorado, and Oregon.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting to kind of see you guys diving into this space and been into it for quite some time, and even staying focused right there in the value add space. And so I'm looking forward to diving into this asset. I know in the green room a little bit, we were talking about some of the different nuances to it. So it should be very interesting for the listeners here. So it's 384 units, like we mentioned earlier, and it's located there in Orlando, Florida. So why don't you get us started and talk to me a little bit about how you originally found and sourced this particular deal?
Sure. So we found this through the brokerage community, but it was not on the market. We knew the broker because we had worked on deals together, and they told me that deal was coming up. And I asked them if there was going to be an opportunity to preempt it prior to it going out. And they said, yeah, there's going to be. So I wrote an offer, very aggressive. We put a significant amount of hard money up, and the seller was kind enough to sell us the deal. We capitalized it through a syndication. It was approximately $108 million purchase with $120 million capitalization. We had a $32 million equity check, which we syndicated out. We had approximately 400 investors in the deal, and we did part of it with CrowdStreet. We gave them a $20 million allocation, and the remaining $12 million we did on our own.
So this is definitely going to be some interesting conversation here. So how much of the 120 million was CapEx?
About 12. Oh, no, some of it was fees. So it's about 10 CapEx.
Okay, so 10 million in CapEx. And what was it about this deal that attracted you to it the most?
It's 2008 vintage, so high quality. It's 50% 3-bedroom, 3-bath units. It's on iDrive, in the iDrive corridor. So it caters to all the entertainment in Disney. Phenomenal area. It's got a brand new school going in across the street. And it really checks every box. It's an amazing deal. It had a 5.5 cap going in with the master lease to Disney, which will then probably drop into the 3s when the master lease burns off and we take over all of their subleases, which would just be the direct leases with the tenants, and then we'll be renovating back to a 5.5. So it's just a great deal based on today's metrics.
And why do you think that the seller decided to sell it to you instead of going full market?
Because we wrote them a very aggressive offer with a great price. What looked like a great price, because the market at that time was escalating so fast. Nobody really knew where the market would speak, and it turned out to be a great price. And we wrote with millions of dollars in hard money, so they knew we could close. So
the particular setup with this was that there was a outside group that owned the property. Was it the original developer, or was it still somebody, or was it somebody that had bought it from the developer?
It was somebody that had bought it from the developer, but the developer was Wood Partners, and midway through the entitlement, this opportunity to master lease it Disney came up. Disney was doing master leases in that pocket for their internship program. And they approached Wood Partners and asked them to do a master lease situation. So they made a couple of changes in the entitlement at that point, which was, doing a significant amount of 3-bedroom, 3-bath units, more amenities, or converting the amenities to what were like screening rooms and teaching rooms. And it's been operated as a Disney property for about 10 years or maybe more. About 14 years. So that's, the huge opportunity there.
So I'm assuming it was like a 15-year master lease. Is that what it was?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And what kind of escalations were there year over year in the lease?
Off the top of my head, I believe they're about 2.5 to 3%.
Okay. So definitely I can see, especially over the last couple of years, how we've seen tremendous rent growth, much higher than just 2.5 to 3%, that there's likely quite a bit of opportunity that's available on this particular asset, that once this master lease comes available, that there would be some great opportunity there. Has Disney already said that they will not be renewing the lease?
Correct. Disney has said that they will not be renewing the lease, and the units are in original classic condition, which looks like a real classic from the 80s or 90s, because the developer at the time was instructed to use just very low end entry-level finishes because it was being used for an internship program. It's definitely not what they would have done if they were developing market rate units. So we have an opportunity to gut the units, upgrade them, modernize the asset, and lease it out at market rate.
Okay. And so, this particular deal being, over $100 million, $108 million purchase price. I know you mentioned putting, multiple 7 figures of hard money up. Walk me through the terms of this agreement a little bit with the hard money, because I know, our group has had to do a very similar situation, and pretty much every deal we've had in the last probably 2 to 3 years of putting some significant hard money up into the 7 figures to be able to do that. So walk us through some of the terms that you had outlined in there in regards to the final offer that you put on this one.
Oh, this was like the wild, wild west. They came back to us and they said, if you want this deal, here's what you have to do. The PSA has to be signed in 3 days. So the lawyers worked on it almost around the clock. They wanted $9 million in hard money, 3 at signing, 3 a month after signing, and 3 2 weeks after that. And then we closed 2 weeks thereafter. So it was just gun to your head. You better close this deal.
Mm-hmm. And at each point, it was non-refundable, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Pass through.
Yeah. And did they hold on to the money, or did you go the typical route with escrow holding the money or title?
They held the money.
Yeah, that definitely is when you say aggressive, that's definitely not necessarily aggressive on the purchase, but aggressive on those terms to do that. So and we've had to do that in the past ourselves, and we wouldn't have gotten the deal unless we did that. So kudos to you for wearing around the brass balls, if you will, and ponying up. So
that's exactly right.
So
it took a lot of intestinal fortitude.
Yes, I'm sure it did. So how many rounds back and forth did you go with this group on the offer? Was it you submitted a pretty good aggressive offer up front, and they basically said, we're good with the purchase price, but here's what we want to see on hard money? Or was there some more kind of going back and forth on the purchase price?
I was told that we could preempt at 105. They came back to me at 108. At 108, I wrote at 105. They came back at 108. At 108, it still worked. So we bought it. Yeah. And it was, it was a mid-5 cap going in. And then we were also solving to a mid-5 cap. So that was fine.
So at what point did you go and tour the property?
I toured it before I toured it right as I was told it was going to be an opportunity. I wasn't very busy at the time. We had just opened the office. I moved to Miami 3 months before then, and I didn't have much going on. We were just closing our first deal, and we needed more deals to put in the pipeline. So we toured. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And were there any other You may or may not know this, but were there any other groups that were kind of offering around the same time that, they could have awarded it to them instead of you? Or were you guys kind of one of the first ones that kind of went out there and put a nice aggressive offer out there and were able to get it done?
It was us. We had it ISO just all by themselves, and we went very, very aggressive. And I think the way we behaved and performed, at least in writing, I don't think anybody was going to come close to us. So they really focused on us as a buyer.
Mm-hmm. So originally, when you first kind of were walking through the introduction of this particular asset, and one of the things that you liked about it, one of the things that you mentioned was that you were buying it at, I think you said, a 5.5 cap. Is that correct?
Yes, the master lease was at a 5.5, and then on our numbers, based on where they were subleasing it, because they vacated the asset because all of their interns left. Their interns went to a Disney property that they had built closer to the theme parks. So the asset was vacant. They had to clean it up. They hired Lincoln Property Company to lease it up. They leased it up at rents 40% below market because they just want to get it full. They leased 384 units in 7 weeks. And wow. Yeah, exactly. Which is why it's dipping from a 5.5 to a 3.5, because they didn't lease it up at market. So it's fine. It is what it is. We'll work through that, and then we'll pop it back up to a 5.5.
Okay. So that makes sense. Or hopefully past that, that you
exactly.
bought it at a 5.5.
Exactly. Probably a 6.25, 6.5.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good. That definitely makes sense. I was wondering how that happened. So Disney's basically removed all of their people out of it, and they're basically saying, and we still have this master lease. We're still paying for this, but let's go at least get some other people in these units to help to offset the lease.
Correct.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It's totally understandable there. But I'm just trying to picture in 7 weeks getting 384 units filled. I mean, just the amount of U-Haul trucks that have to come in and out in 7 weeks is a phenomenal feat.
That would not work in a high rise.
No, for sure. Well, good. All right. So you got this deal under contract. You guys are excited. You're elated. And now you are going to move forward with this. So walk me through some of the timelines of it. Was it a typical kind of 30-30-30, or was it just a straight 30-30, or a 30-21 or 21-30? What was the terms of the due diligence, the amount of time you had for due diligence, and then also the time frame for closing?
No due diligence. They sent us a PCA, their PCA from a couple of years ago. It was an 08 vintage asset, so we were pretty comfortable just based on the age. So 60 days, go. You got 60 days to close it. That's it.
Yeah. No extension.
Funny story. What's that?
No extensions.
No.
Yeah.
Our equity, we have an institutional equity partner that we had closed with in the past. And a couple hours after I wired in the deposit, they said, we just went to investment committee and it looks like this deal's not getting approved. We're not gonna be able to be there for you. So I was at that point hired on my first $3 million. And I had to call my partner in LA and figure out how we're gonna capitalize a 9-figure deal in less than 60 days, 59 days at that point. So we called CrowdStreet. We've done a lot of deals with them. They're great guys, and they were able to capitalize. We gave them a $20 million allocation. They filled it. We filled up our allocation with our investors, and the deal, unless interest rates go to 8%, the deal is going to be a grand slam.
Yeah. So walk me through I know there's, certain things you probably can't discuss or disclose as far as your work with CrowdStreet, but I'm just curious from like a timeline perspective, what kind of a timeline did they give you as far as how much time they needed to be able to fill that up and, release it on their portal, and then like how long it took them to fill it, and then how long it took you to fill your 12 million?
Oh, they do very, very well with deals in Florida that are newer vintage. It checks 2 very big boxes for them. So we went through, their process of their investment committee and getting everything prepped for the webinar. And the way they do it is they open it up for investments in the middle of the webinar or towards the end of the webinar. And they were fully subscribed in a matter of hours. I think, it was an afternoon webinar. and it was almost fully subscribed by that afternoon. And by the following morning, when we woke up, all 20 million was done.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome to be able to do that. And how long did it take them to go through their process of like going through committee and getting it approved? And like, how far out were you from closing when they were able to raise it?
I called them almost the next day because we'd already been talking on some other deals. And I called them. I said, hey, do you guys want to do this deal? They said, we would love to do this deal. And it took him a few weeks, then maybe one more week for the webinar. So, you know, we were pretty comfortable with our capitalization about a month into the deal.
Okay, cool. And then now that we're kind of like got the deal under contract, we got our equity secured. Talk to me about any issues that maybe came up during the due diligence process. And I know there wasn't an official like period of due diligence, but I'm still pretty sure you guys went through a due diligence process to clean things up as far as like the lender and stuff like that on this deal.
So what we did was we ran our DD once we were already hard. So we ran a process, of course. We got environmental, we got our PCA guys out from the West Coast who are fantastic. There was no lease audit to do because it was a net lease deal and we don't have access to their leases. So we did a lease abstract of the lease with Disney, which we actually did during the PSA process. So again, environmental, zoning report, survey, all that stuff was done once we were already hard and there were no hiccups, clean.
Good. There's nothing really issues there. Now, once the master lease is up, are those leases conveying to you or do you get to renegotiate those leases or how does that process work?
They convey to us.
Okay. And is that basically something that was agreed upon before they started doing that? Or I'm just trying to figure out how that original lease or was actually worded to accommodate that.
It's in the master lease, and that's what we discussed with Disney, that we can just, you know, have a smooth transition and we'll take over the subleases.
Okay. Okay. And I'm sure that's best for all parties involved because Disney doesn't want to have a bad name of like kicking people out just to get rid of a master lease or anything like that. So, and you guys don't want to have a property that's got nobody in it. You'd rather do it over a period of time to be able to kind of get those leases up from renewals.
Right.
Are these leases that they have, are they month to month leases or do they have them as like long-term kind of 12 to 15 month leases like a normal property would have?
I think it's a combination. I don't remember if there are any month to month, but I think it's probably a combination of like 9 to 14 month leases.
Yeah. Okay. And how did you end up financing this deal?
We went to a debt fund and they financed it at approximately 73% of cost.
Okay. So 73%. And what kind of interest rate?
Well, at the time it was L, now it's S. So SOFR 295.
Okay, so SOFR plus 295, and 30-year AM, I'm assuming, and
no 10 all IO.
There's no okay, AM. So all IO. It's all IO, and how long was the IO period? Is it like a typical 311?
311. Well, it's the whole loan is IO. There's no P&I at any point in the loan. The first extension does not have a test. So it's really a de facto 4-year loan. And the cost to extend into the first extension is 10 basis points. And then there's some sort of a debt yield test for the last extension to get into year 5.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. So technically after 5 years, you know, I'm assuming that once you guys lease it up again and do your renovations, you're going to want to refinance it anyway into some other form of debt to be able to pull out some equity or maybe even potentially sell it at that point. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Is the plan right now to sell at that point or to refinance?
Probably refinance. I mean, it really depends on how the market's doing. With, you know, interest rates are definitely the 800-pound gorilla, and rent growth and inflation. So it's just so hard to tell the way things are going to look in 2 years from now or 3 years from now.
Okay. And let's kind of move to a different topic here. How did you end up structuring this deal with the investors?
We did a sort of like an institutional waterfall with a 9 pref, 80/20 to I think it was a 14, 70/30 to like an 18, 60/40 thereafter, something like that. 1 point AC fee. We get a CM fee, property and asset management fee, because we self-manage.
And from a property management perspective, what do you charge for the property management fee?
3% and a 1% asset management fee.
Okay. And I'm obviously with the property management fee, it's based off of the gross income off the property. Is that the same thing with the asset management fee?
Yes.
Or is it off the equity?
Collections, correct.
Okay. It's off the collections. And can you think of any other issues that came up throughout the process for this acquisition, or have we pretty much covered most of it?
I think we pretty much covered it.
Okay. So I have two final questions for you to kind of wrap up the episode. First one is, what did you find that was kind of easier during this entire process that you thought maybe originally was going to be a little bit more challenging?
Syndicating out the deal to individual investors. I did not think there was any way we would be able to raise money through 400 investors, $32 million. My joke with my partner was, this isn't a syndication, it's an IPO.
That's very true. What was the average investment on this one?
The average investment from CrowdStreet was about 50 grand, and we reduced our minimum for them to 25. So the average was 50. I would say average in the deal is probably about 100, 150. Okay. Not bad.
And final question for you. I know that was an extra question in there, but the final question I had for you was kind of contrasting that other question I had, which is, what did you find that was actually a little bit harder than you had originally expected?
I don't know. I would say, again, going back to equity, just the complete blind side of not knowing where we were going to stand with a $32 million check in the first few days, and then just going through that process. And I got to tell you, I had a lot of sleepless nights about that, but we finally got it done, and hopefully we live happily ever after.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, it's great to be able to hear about this particular acquisition and kind of the different nuances of it. Definitely very unique with the master lease there with Disney there in Orlando. Appreciate you jumping on and sharing it with us. How can the listeners reach out to you if they have further questions for you about this particular acquisition, or maybe want to join you on one of your future opportunities?
Please email me. My email address is max, M-A-X, @Tryon, T-R-I-O-N, like Nancy, properties, plural.com.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, Max. Look forward to continue to follow you as you continue to find more deals, get them under contract and get them closed, and put them through the finish line there. Look forward to having you on a future episode.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks, Max.
Talk to you.